Welcome to The Explainer. So today we are tackling a really fascinating concept, risk mitigation. And yeah, I hear it. Risk management usually sounds like what? Endless compliance checklists, dry paperwork, basically the kind of corporate seminars that put people right to sleep. But we're going to completely flip that script today. We are going to transform how you look at risk, moving it from this boring, passive necessity into an active strategic advantage. Because honestly, when disaster actually strikes, having a solid framework to mitigate those threats is exactly what can literally save an entire organization.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap. First, the risk challenge. Second, 3 fundamental strategies. Third, tools, operational covers. Fourth, the Bacardi case. Fifth, insurance and derivatives. And finally, what do we want to protect? This whole journey is going to take us from basic risk frameworks straight through to some high-stakes, historical masterstrokes where these exact strategies were put to the ultimate test.
Section 1. The Risk Challenge, Lowering the Stakes. Let's start with the core issue here. Simply identifying a risk is totally useless if you don't actually have a plan to mitigate it. Just staring at a potential threat on a spreadsheet? Yeah, that doesn't make it go away.
When we talk about mitigation, we're focusing on 2 very concrete goals. First, lowering probability. That's essentially doing whatever we can to prevent the event from happening in the first place. Second, lowering impact. Meaning, if the worst inevitably does happen, we minimize the fallout. Think about it like this. We can't always control the probability of a massive storm rolling in a town, right? But we can almost always build a stronger roof to dramatically reduce its impact on our house.
Section 2. 3 fundamental strategies, the menu of choices. So how do we actually pull that off? Well, management basically has a menu of choices when facing any kind of organizational threat. There are 3 fundamental strategies here. Number 1, transfer the risk to a third party, someone who's just better equipped to handle it, either financially or operationally. Number 2, prepare to assume it internally. This means you are actively building up your own capacity, maybe setting aside capital, essentially creating your own financial fortress. Or number 3, avoid it entirely. You just decide to discontinue an activity. You don't launch that product, or you refuse to enter that volatile new market. And what is absolutely crucial to understand is that these strategies are not mutually exclusive. The real secret of highly resilient companies is that they deliberately combine these approaches.
Section 3. Tools, operational covers. Moving from high-level strategy down to the real world, let's look at the actual tools we use to execute those strategies, starting with the most strategic one of all.
Now, what's really interesting here is how everyday operational choices naturally generate risk positions, or completely cover them. Operational covers aim to mitigate risk by lowering probability or impact through direct, day-to-day management decisions. These are your physical business choices. Where do you put your factories? How do you run your supply chain? Who do you hire? These choices deliberately blunt a threat. Let me give you a real-world example to show you exactly what I mean.
Take Zara, the massive fashion retailer. They constantly face this huge risk, demand volatility. If you guess a fashion trend wrong, you are left with tons of dead stock. That's a financial nightmare. So to mitigate this, Zara deliberately built a supply chain that is short, incredibly fast, and relies heavily on air delivery. Now, air delivery is insanely expensive, but Zara knowingly pays that huge premium because it avoids the utterly devastating financial impact of having unsold inventory or missing out on a sudden, fleeting trend. It's an everyday operational decision acting as a brilliant risk cover.
Another fantastic example from the fashion world is Benetton. They use a technique called postponement. So instead of manufacturing specific, brightly colored clothes in China and risking that the color falls completely out of fashion by the time the shipment crosses the ocean, they tried something else. They made undyed gray clothes in China at a super low cost. Then they shipped them over to Europe, right near their consumers, and they just waited. Once the market dictated what the trendy colors were for that exact season, they dyed them locally. Patience was literally their ultimate risk mitigator. They postponed the final value add, which drastically cut their supply chain risk.
And hey, this is not just about fashion. It applies to heavy industry too. Think about aviation. Airlines are so intensely focused on hedging against volatile fuel prices that they will literally strip the paint right off their planes or pull heavy service carts off the flights just to save weight and burn less gas. Or look at the long-distance trucking industry. Companies naturally mitigate the risk of terrible accidents by mandating strict rest hours or even installing sensors to detect if a driver misses a stop. That fundamentally lowers the probability of a crash. These are universal, highly practical operational covers in action.
Section 4. The Bacardi case, a masterstroke in political risk mitigation. My absolute favorite example of an operational cover deals with a threat that is way harder to predict than fashion trends or fuel prices.
Let's look at a true piece of history. The year is 1960. The company is Bacardi, which famously was founded in Cuba. The company's leader at the time, José Pepin Bosch, anticipated the severe political risk brewing on the island. Now, this wasn't a supply chain hiccup. This was the potential erasure of a massive global brand. So he makes three monumental operational decisions. First, he physically moved a production plant over to Puerto Rico. Second, he set up a completely separate U.S. entity. And third, and this is the kicker, he transferred the incredibly valuable Bacardi trademark out of Cuba entirely, placing it safely under the umbrella of that U.S. entity.
So when Fidel Castro ultimately expropriated private businesses in Cuba, the state seized Bacardi's physical machines, their buildings, the literal nuts and bolts. But Bosch's foresight was absolutely brilliant. As the research points out, they didn't influence the probability of the event, but substantially lowered its impact on the organization, ultimately saving Bacardi. They couldn't stop a whole revolution, right? But because the true value, the brand itself and the cash flow, was safe offshore, they completely neutralized the revolution's impact on their corporate survival.
Section 5. Insurance and derivatives. Transferring the financial burden. All right, so those are physical, operational tools. Now let's pivot to the financial tools in our kit. We're moving off the factory floor and into the contracts and policies that let us transfer our financial burdens. Think about this shocking number for a second. 42.2%. According to the source research, that is the average level of underinsurance for buildings against fire. Nearly half of the true value of these physical assets is just entirely unprotected. It really proves that tons of companies and individuals are passively assuming massive, catastrophic risks without even realizing the dangerous exposure they're carrying around every single day.
So why exactly is the insurance market failing to properly transfer this risk? Well, the research points to three big pitfalls. First, a serious lack of proper advisory. Basically, insurers acting a lot more like quota-driven salespeople than genuine risk consultants. Second, massive inconsistencies between the premium prices people pay and their actual real-world risk profile. And third, a notoriously slow adaptation to emerging risks. Think about it. A major cyber hack today, or the theft of intangible digital assets, can be just as devastating as a physical fire burning down a warehouse. Yet insurance products for these modern threats are severely lagging. Beyond traditional insurance, we also have financial derivatives. Now please, don't let the technical jargon intimidate you here. A financial derivative is simply a contract that allows economic agents to download specific risks onto counterparties who are better equipped to assume them. So the crucial point is, you're essentially making an opposite bet in the financial markets to balance out your real-world physical risks. If your entire business runs on a fleet of delivery trucks and you're terrified that fuel prices are going to skyrocket, you can buy a derivative contract that literally pays you if fuel prices go up. It perfectly balances the scales. You've probably heard the names of these contracts thrown around: futures, forwards, swaps, options like calls and puts. But whether you're locking in a future price with a forward contract or buying the option to sell something later down the line, the real danger highlighted in our source material isn't the complex math behind them. The real danger is top management avoiding them entirely out of fear or just plain misunderstanding. Leaving these financial tools out of your mitigation strategy, it's literally like fighting a heavyweight match with one hand tied behind your back.
Section 6. What do we want to protect? The ultimate strategic question. We've covered the physical covers, the insurance, the derivatives. But as we bring this explainer tour to close, we have to tie all these powerful tools back to the absolute core purpose of the business. And this brings us to the ultimate dilemma: protecting cash flow versus protecting reputation. You absolutely have to know what you are aiming to save. Look, an insurance policy can certainly cut you a check to reimburse your cash flow after a massive disaster, sure. But an insurance check can do absolutely nothing to repair a ruined reputation. It can't win back broken trust from a betrayed customer base. Cash can eventually be printed, it can be borrowed, but trust cannot. Your mitigation tools have to perfectly match the specific asset you are actually trying to protect. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly vital question. Has your organization decided what it is truly protecting? Because if you haven't actively decided what you're willing to lose, you might just end up losing everything. Don't let risk be something that just happens to you. Take a really hard look at your menu of choices, build your operational covers, understand your financial transfers, and start actively managing your future. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer.